Washington, have you found yourself digging a little deeper to pay for everyday things? Now, inflation is at a 30-year high, but there are some things you can do to ease the pressure a little. Kristen chatted with author and CPA Chris Fehr on what you need to know about inflation and how to prevent it from wearing you down.
Chris, we are happy to have you here to talk and help us better understand what's going on with inflation. It's at a 30-year high, and this graph shows really several different measures of inflation, which to somebody like me can be very difficult to understand. But you have an easier measure called the Big Mac Index. What is that?
Well, sure, Kristen. You know, they have so many different statistics for inflation. It's almost like they're trying to confuse us on purpose. So if we make it more simple, we look at just the price of the Big Mac. When the Big Mac came out in 1967, it cost 45 cents.
Wow.
By 2000, the price was $2.39. And by 2020, it was $4.95 for the same Big Mac. Nothing has changed. So inflation is the constant erosion of the value of your dollar. A dollar today buys a whole lot more than it will a year from now or 2 years from now.
Simple and flat as that. All right. So there does seem to be many different things that are driving inflation. What do you think drives inflation?
Well, I think the biggest driver of inflation right now is the government printing money. Since the pandemic started, we have been printing $120 billion each month, or $1.4 trillion annually. That's unsustainable. And in the negative consequences of COVID-19, they've printed so much money. If you look at the entire history of the United States, 245 years, all the money that we've printed 40% of it in just 1 year, in 2020. So even though politicians are saying it's transitory and it might end, you have people like the chief financial officer of Kroger said that he expects inflation, food inflation, to be another 2 to 3% higher this year. So are you going to believe someone that has a vested interest in telling the truth? Or are you going to believe politicians that might, want to muddy the waters a little bit? I know who I'd believe.
The statistics and just the amount of money printed in 2020 is crazy. So what can we do? What can Americans do, consumers do, to offset inflation and the impact of it?
Well, Kristen, I think the number one thing that especially the middle class should do, because their salaries are not really, they're going to stay the same unless we try to change them, but the cost of everything is going to increase. So the first thing they should do is go in and ask for a raise. Now is the best time that I've ever seen to ask for a raise, because there are 10 million job openings and 7 million people on unemployment. And not all of those are looking for work. So employers are really struggling. We see help wanted signs everywhere. So now is the time to go in and get yourself a raise. The second thing that people should do is they should try to have their wages tied to inflation. And the way to do that is just go into your boss and say, listen, I love working here. I want to stay here. But the only way I can survive as a family is to have my salary keep up with inflation. So try to have your salary or your wages indexed to inflation to change at least once a year, if not every 6 or 3 months, to try to keep up with that. And then the third thing that people should really focus on is investing wisely. Dr. Michael Fink of the American College of Financial Services said that a 50-50 portfolio of treasury bonds and stocks like the S&P 500 produces 75% less income than it did 10 years ago in 2011. So we really want to look at assets that have historically held their value during periods of high inflation. These are hard assets that have an intrinsic value separate from the value of a dollar, like gold, silver, real estate. Cryptocurrencies are very, very strong right now. But even things like art, Rolexes, and collector cars, they have value regardless of what the dollar is going to do.
All right, so many ways to offset that. Is that, you mentioned the salary, is that kind of like a cost of living raise that the phrase we hear?
It would be. COLA, or cost of living adjustment, or cost of living increase, is something that you want to have tied to your salary so that you can keep up.
You have taught me so much this morning, Chris. I appreciate you, and thank you for helping us better understand inflation.
My pleasure, Kristen.